In our final lecture together, I want us to come back to something fundamental about storytelling. The joy of gathering together inside the world of a story with our loved ones and just experiencing another world with the characters and the adventures that these stories bring to us. Now, I'm blessed with two young children, a boy and a girl, and they daily remind me of the power of stories to guide and to heal and renew and inspire us. So I hope this course has given you options to choose from when you think about classic wonder tales. The collection of stories that we've encountered in this course has provided a cultural trip around the world as we visited tales from a variety of countries and continents, and from a range of times, ancient, medieval, and modern. We've heard tales from ancient Greece, from Egypt, from Iran, from India, Kenya, from Japan, from the Philippines. We've heard stories from Scandinavia, from Denmark, and from other Nordic countries, from Australia. We've heard stories from Germany, Russia, England, Scotland, Italy, and from France. And finally, we've heard tales from the United States and from African American culture. Now let's end with two final stories, and I've been saving these stories for last because they are two of my absolute favorites. This first story from Denmark ties together several of the motifs and themes that we've encountered over the course of our time together. Now I'm going to read this story that I found in my grandfather's school book. When he was going to school in the 1920s, the primary literature for children in the first grade through the fifth grade was folk tales and fairy tales. The books from his childhood are full of these stories. And when I was younger, my grandmother would read to me out of her and my grandfather's cloth-covered old school books. So, from Denmark, The Wonderful Pot. Once upon a time, there lived a little boy and his mother. They were very poor because a rich man had stolen all of their money. They lived in a tiny hut, and all that they had in the world was a cow. And at last they had not a bite to eat. What could be done? "You must sell the cow," the mother said one day to the little boy. In what other stories did we encounter the motif about selling the cow? Jack and the Beanstalk, and the doctor and his pupil. So he tied a rope to the cow and started off to sell her. On the way, he met a stranger. The stranger took from under his cloak. Is it magic beans? Not this time. It was a black iron pot with 3 legs. "Will you give me your cow for this iron pot?" he asked. "Oh, no, not I," said the little boy. Just then, he heard a wee voice. It was the little iron pot talking. "Take me, do take me," said the pot. The little boy gave the cow to the stranger and took the pot home. And when his mother saw the pot, she was angry. "What have you done?" she cried. "To think of selling our good cow for a little iron pot." Just then, the little pot began to dance about the floor. "Clean me and put me over the fire," it said. So the mother washed the pot and set it over the fire. "If only I had something to put in it," she said. I skip," said the pot, jumping from the fire and running across the floor. "How far do you skip?" asked the mother. "To the rich man's house," answered the pot. It skipped out of the door and up the road it went as fast as its 3 little legs could carry it. Now, the rich man's wife was making a pudding when the pot skipped up to her door. "You are just what I need to boil my pudding in," she said. And she filled the little pot with all kinds of good things, flour, butter, sugar, fruit, and spices. "Now boil," she said. And the pudding boiled and boiled and boiled, and at last it was done. Tap, tap went the 3 little legs. The pot jumped from the fire and skipped out of the door and ran down the road. "Stop! Stop!" cried the rich man's wife. "Where are you going with my pudding?" "This hero is a trickster. He's a thief," but he's good. "Home again," called the pot, and the rich man's wife could not stop it. The poor little boy and his mother had all the pudding they could eat. So this pot is a magical helper, but he's kind of like Puss in Boots. He's a trickster hero. The next morning, the wonderful pot said, "I skip, I skip." "How far do you skip?" asked the mother. "To the rich man's barn," answered the pot. It skipped out the door and up the road as fast as its 3 little legs could carry it. It stopped at the barn door. Inside, the threshers were threshing the grain. "See that fine little pot?" cried the threshers. "We can use it to store away part of our wheat." And then the threshers poured a peck of wheat into the pot. There was room for more. They poured a bushel of wheat, and still there was room for more. They poured and poured. At last, the pot held all of the rich man's wheat. Tap, tap went the 3 little legs. Out the door skipped the little pot, and down the road it went. "Where are you going?" called the threshers. "Home again," called back the wonderful little pot. The threshers ran after it, but they could not catch it. Now the poor little boy and his mother had all the bread they could eat. The next morning, the wonderful pot said, "I skip, I skip." "How far do you skip?" asked the mother. "To the rich man's counting house," said the pot. It skipped out the door and up the road as fast as its 3 little legs could carry it. Are you hearing some of the repetition in this story? It's a formula tale. The rich man sat in his counting house, counting his gold. The wonderful pot skipped through the window and jumped upon the table. "Just what I need to measure my gold," said the rich man, and he filled the pot to the rim with gold dollars. Tap, tap went the 3 little legs. Out of the window jumped the pot and ran down the road with it. "Where are you going?" called the rich man. "Home again," called the little pot. The rich man ran and ran, but he could not catch it. Now, the poor little boy and his mother had all the gold that the rich man had stolen from them. Just as in Jack and the Beanstalk, when Jack stole the money back from the giant who had stolen all his father's money. The next day, the wonderful pot said, "I skip, I skip." "Why do you skip, little pot?" asked the mother. "We need nothing more. We have pudding, bread, and gold." They have 3 things. 3 is the magic number in folklore. "I go to get the rich man," answered the little pot. The little pot turns into a questing knight, a knight errant. The bad guy isn't invading, but he goes after him because it's the right and honorable thing to do. The rich man saw the little pot skipping along the road. "Ah, you wicked little pot," he cried. "You took my pudding and my wheat and my gold. I will break you into bits." He caught the little pot by the handle, and his hand stuck. So the rich man was going to use his hands to destroy the pot, but his hands were his own undoing. He's hoisted on his own petard. The phrase comes from Shakespeare. It means to be undone by your own mischief. He could not pull it away, and all the time he was growing smaller and smaller. He's transforming in size, just like the doctor and his pupil. At last, he found himself inside the pot. I skip, said the wonderful pot for the last time. Tap, tap, tap went 3 little legs. The pot skipped gaily off with the rich man inside. He leaves, just like Puss in Boots or the fairy godmother in Cinderella after she's not needed anymore. Nobody knew where they went, for they never came back. Now that's a lovely little tale about sweet revenge. And it gets us thinking about the motifs and themes that we've heard repeated through different stories across cultures. Now, one folklorist has said that fairy tales take myths and bring them down to earth. They take the big themes of life and bring them into focus through the lens of talking animals, enchanted places, and magical helpers. And there are a few key themes that run throughout many of the stories that we've heard in this course. Many of the themes in folk and fairy tales center on childbearing and child rearing. In many of the stories we've heard throughout the course, the parents wanted a child and they went to great lengths to have a child. Tom Thumb's father goes to a fairy. Thumbelina's mother does the same thing. The parents of Sleeping Beauty go for many years without being able to find a child or have a child, and then they finally conceive a baby girl. Even Rumpelstiltskin is a story that involves a creature who wants a child of his very own. Many stories begin with pregnant mothers who are thinking about the baby in their belly. In some versions of Snow White's mother ponders over her unborn child as she sits by that ebony window and dreams about what her baby daughter will be like when she's born and what she'll look like. Rapunzel's mother fixates on the foods her unborn child craves, with her husband wanting to satisfy those cravings so that the baby will not be born with a birth defect, as was believed to happen in those days. And so again and again we see heroes of these stories being determined and daring. Jack climbs up the beanstalk. Molly Whoopie goes back into the forest to get the treasures from the ogre. Cinderella goes not once to the ball, but back again and again. The girl in East of the Sun, West of the Moon does not give up on her true love. She travels literally to the four corners of the earth, the four winds, to find him. The motivations are sometimes the same. They all dive into adventures because it's the only way to ensure that their family will be able to eat and be safe. Jack provides for his mother, Molly for her sisters, and the girl from East of the Sun provides for her family when she leaves with the white bear in the first place. And sometimes the motivations are different. In the end, the girl from East of the Sun is motivated by love to find her bear prince. The creatures in these stories know that they have to be resourceful if they want to survive. The animals in The Musicians of Bremen, they work together to outwit their masters and the robbers in the woods. Many stories feature themes of entrapment or capture, with a captive female heroine, Rapunzel in the tower, or Sleeping Beauty in her enchanted castle, Snow White in her little glass coffin. The idea of a youngest daughter or son, the least powerful or most diminutive in the family, being the mightiest hero. Well, this theme is repeated throughout oral folklore, from Molly Whoopie to the three little goslings, to tiny Tom Thumb, the smallest of the small. And many of these tales are rise tales. The little tailor rises from his tiny tailor's office to become the king. Arthur goes from being a foster child with no heritage to becoming king too. The mercurial nature of fairies is something we've also explored. Fairies aren't always the happy little creatures we find in the front of greeting cards with little wings and bells on their shoes. Now, this is a picture of Thumbelina, who gets the gift of fairy wings, and then she's renamed Maya. But this picture was a creation of Hans Christian Andersen. In most oral traditional fairy tales, the queen of the fairies is beautiful and dangerous. Fairies can bestow gifts at the same time as they can curse you. Fairies can take your children. Remember Rumpelstiltskin. Remember Rapunzel. They can give you children, as with Tom Thumb. They can curse or save your children, as with Sleeping Beauty. And places reappear as well across stories. For example, the enchanted forest as a source of transformation. This comes up in Hansel and Gretel, Snow White, East of the Sun, Rapunzel, the little tailor. The little tailor battles giants and a unicorn and a boar here. Androcles and the lion. an Aesop's fable about a slave who ran away and helped a lion in distress. This happens in Thumbelina, The Musicians of Bremen. All these characters find transformation in an enchanted forest. The enchanted forest is a place full of powerful possibilities. This is, after all, where the Baba Yaga lives. You could die here. Or you could have your fortunes changed for the better. You could lose your tail. You could discover a maiden in a tower. You could be that trapped maiden in the tower. As we've talked about some of the major ways that folklore scholars analyze and break down stories to study them cross-culturally, we're going back to the idea that the forest is an agent of change. And we can relate this back to the structure of the rite of passage, the idea that in an adventure or in a turning point of our lives, we're separated from our known world and thrust into a wholly different world. In this case, the wilds of the forest. Going into a forest, we can imagine the stories we've heard about in this course coming to life. The trees awakening from the tree spirits within them, the nymphs. Now, there's a classic tale called The Wonderful Wood, in which the evil villains are swallowed up by the spirits of the trees, who are called upon by a girl who knocks on the wood to awaken the spirits. And when we knock on wood, we're doing just that. We're trying to get the attention of the wood spirits to help us in our time of need. We learned about tale types, the broad, overarching headings that identify kinds of stories, such as Cinderella stories, of which we heard many different versions, vulnerable people and the ogre as a tale type, including Hansel and Gretel and Molly Whoopie, and other tale types. We learned that stories contain motifs or story parts that form a kind of vocabulary in folklore. Many stories of different tale types share the same motifs. As we heard, selling the cow is a motif that begins the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, and it's also present in The Doctor and His Pupil, when a boy transforms into a cow to be sold at market. And the motif reappears again in the story you heard today, The Wonderful Pot. Motifs get repeated throughout and across tale types. And getting familiar with the story motifs, it's like learning a kind of vocabulary in oral folklore. Like a dancer learning the steps, or like a singer learning different notes. The notes can be rearranged to create a new song, but you recognize the notes from other songs you've heard before. A dancer knows how to flap ball change and can insert that same move into a variety of combinations, and it's similar with motifs and stories. The notion of repetition is important in an oral tradition, where redundancy, it acts as a memory aid. The stories we heard in this course were full of traditional characters, ogres, which the rich man in the story we just heard acts like a big ogre, like the ogres in the Jack Tales. Well, he's just as big of a bully as those giants and ogres who can be outsmarted, even by a character who is very small. Now, there are small or unassuming heroes in many of these stories, and certainly Tom Thumb and Thumbelina, but also the underdog characters who have a very, very small amount of power. But they find that they have great strength when magical helpers, such as the pot, come to their aid. We also learned about archetypal figures in stories. Some heroes and villains and helpers are archetypal characters. While archetypal roles are often gendered, some qualities are masculine, some qualities are feminine. Remember what we said about the characters not being limited to boys or girls. And some of these archetypal roles include the warrior hero, such as King Arthur in his early questing days. And oral traditions are full of women warriors too. For example, Molly Whoopie. She's a female warrior. The maiden, Snow White, Rapunzel, and we see some male characters as maiden figures in need of rescue. The White Bear, who's put under a sleeping enchantment. He's held under guard by the ogress princess. The mother and father figures we see over and over again throughout folk and fairy tales. Mothers who often die too young. And fathers, like Arthur's father, Uther Pendragon, fathers who never know their sons. They're sages and crones who serve as good helpers to guide and protect you on your journey, who can give you good advice and help you along. East of the sun and west of the moon's 3 aged women under those cliffs, they bestow gifts and direction to the girl. Merlin protects Arthur and helps him assume power on the throne, and he guides him towards the sword Excalibur. The yellow cow and the chickens in Mahpishani, who help her escape her stepmother's wrath. Folklore has a fluid relationship with writing, as in the example of The Wonderful Pot, which I know about because it was published in writing about 100 years ago, and it was circulated in print before that. We understand The Wonderful Pot to be a folk tale because the author didn't write the story from a combination of folklore motifs, as Hans Christian Andersen did, and the author of The Three Bears did. Nor did he compose the story as an effort to sell a product, as with the author who published the Paul Bunyan and Babe the Blue Ox stories. Now, this author got this story from oral sources, and from literary sources that also used oral sources. The tale was circulated and edited by the folk in an oral tradition before and after it encountered the printed word. The oral tradition and writing, they work in tandem when it comes to classic folklore. But the oral cultural component of storytelling is central for these stories to be called folk tales. So where do I go from here? Culture is an interconnected web. Stories linked to proverbs that connect with everyday speech, that then helps us recast our own life stories through the lens, sometimes, of fairy tales. It's hard to untangle it all. When we hear a folk tale or a wonder tale, it tugs on a thread of oral cultural history. And that thread touches many other threads in the web of culture, including animated movie versions of stories and adaptations of the stories into contemporary contexts. We see the Cinderella tale type in popular movies all the time. The next time you're at the movie theater, look through the movie descriptions and see if you can identify any of the tale types and motifs we've encountered in this course. You will see several. What about the songs that you've heard lately? Do they touch on any of the themes in any of the classic stories you've heard here? The world of folklore is large, and this course barely scratches the surface of oral folklore tales and practices. Urban legends, jokes, family stories, and other genres of stories and tale types beyond the classics, such as the stories about outwitting the devil and outwitting death. Well, these are all integral parts of oral folklife. Oral folklore is all around us, and like many of the cultural studies, we acknowledge it with a wink and a nod. Now, these actions themselves are connected with tales about the fairy folk. But rarely do we pay attention to how pervasive and permeable the old tales are. They surround us like an invisible blanket. In most folk tales, they don't live happily ever after, but happily for a long time, or until the end of their days. There's no sentimentality about living forever in most old folk tales. Oral traditional folk tales give us the kind of ending that we can expect out of life. Not a forever after on earth, but an afterward that we can live with. An afterward that may not be perfect, as we saw in the Italian version of Sleeping Beauty. She lived happily for a long time with her prince, until her mother-in-law wanted to eat her with his sauce. In our lecture about the Frog Prince, we talked about how the princess didn't like the frog in the palace. He belonged elsewhere. Much of life is about trying to find our place, or make our place in the world. And we do the same things with stories, even classic stories. When we connect with a story, it's because that story satisfies what storytelling scholars call narrative fit. It's when we can see ourselves in the story, figuring out how to tell our story in a way that fits with who we think we are and who we want to be. The last story I'll tell you touches on a very old tale type in world folklore. How do we really wrestle with the end of our own human story, our own ending, the ending of those whom we love. Let's listen to one last Jack tale. It's from Scotland, the story of Death in a Nut. Once upon a time, there was a boy named Jack. And Jack lived with his mother by the beach. And Jack, in this story, he was a beachcomber. He would go along the beach, and everybody take your hands, and he would just pick things up off the beach. Well, one day, Jack's mother became very ill. She was so ill, she wouldn't eat anything or drink anything at all. Oh, mother, what's wrong with you? He couldn't do anything for her. She wouldn't take anything. Finally, he didn't know what to do. He went out walking by the beach, and as he went walking, he looked over and he saw somebody walking down the beach, coming towards him and towards his family's cottage. And as that figure came closer and closer, he saw that whatever it was had spindly legs and a black cloak over its head and all shoulders all the way down to the ground, and out from that hood was protruding the broad forehead and 2 buck teeth of a strange-looking man who was carrying a scythe. And have you ever seen a scythe before? You know what a scythe is? Has a long wooden handle and a curved blade. What is it?
The Grim Reaper.
Yes! It was Death himself. And he was just walking along the beach. And he came across Jack, and he saw, oh, I think I'm heading to that cottage. But Jack, he was like you. He said, oh, no, you'll no go there. No, I know who you are. You're Death. You're Death, and you're coming for my mother. No! And so he began to fight with Death. He took his hands. Everybody take your hands. And he started to wrestle with Death. And Death, oh, my. Well, he took Death's scythe. Everybody take Death's scythe. And he took that handle of it, and he broke it in 2 over his knee, and he threw away the curved part of the blade, and he took that other broken part of the wooden handle. Everybody take the wooden handle. And he started to beat Death to death. He went, oh, whackity, whackity, whackity. Everybody beat on Death. Whackity, 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 whackity. And it was strange because each time he beat on Death, he went, whackity, ooh! And each time he beat on Death, Death started to shrink smaller and smaller. And so everybody take your stick. He went, whackity, ooh, whackity, ooh, whackity, ooh. And each time Death got smaller. Oh, that hurts quite a bit. Oh, no. And he shrunk till he was no larger than a pea. And Jack, he took Death. Ha! And he saw coming up over the ocean waves there was a little hazelnut with a hole in it. And he picked up that hazelnut, being a beachcomber, and he took Death. Everybody take Death? And he crammed Death into that hazelnut. And he took a bit of stick, and he stuck that stick into the hole, and he said, that's the end of you. And he took that hazelnut. Everybody take the nut? And he threw it out, whoop, into the rolling ocean waves. Well, he went back home, and as soon as he walked in the door, oh, Jack, I feel so much better. His mother was sitting up. She was so happy. He was so happy. They decided to have breakfast. So he went out. He picked up some eggs, and he picked up, and everybody pick up an egg. He took it back in home to his mother. His mother took the egg. She tried to crack the egg, but he tried to crack the egg. Wouldn't crack. Tried to crack it again. That's the hardest egg I've ever seen. It wouldn't crack. Jack, bring me the chicken who laid this egg. Jack went over. He got the chicken. Everybody get the chicken. And the woman, she tried to cut off the head of that chicken so she could eat it. Everybody take your butcher's knife. She laid out that chicken's neck, and whoosh, she cut off the head. But what did the head do? Whoosh, hopped right back on that chicken. Chicken sat up and said, "Brrr." Jack, go down into town and get us something to eat. These chickens, something's wrong with them. Well, Jack went down into town. Everybody go down into town. He went to the butcher. Oh, no, Jack, it's the strangest thing. All of my chickens, you won't believe what they're doing. I know what they're doing. You cut off the head. Whoosh, the head jumps back on. It says, "Brrr." Well, no one in town could understand what was happening. Oh, but Jack knew. This was all his fault. He walked back home, and he told his mother, Jack, oh, Jack, what have you done to Death? Don't you know? Oh, now nothing can die. Oh, no, not the egg, not the chicken. We'll all starve. Oh, no, Jack, don't you know? There is no life without death. But mother, I did it for you. No, Jack, you must make this right. I love you, son, but you must make this right. Go and find Death. So off he went. He was very hungry by now. He went walking along the beach. The ocean waves were rolling. He went walking. He was so hungry. He walked for 3 days, and finally, at the end of 3 days, he heard a sound coming from over the ocean waves. And he thought it sounded like, "Oh, help me, I'm getting very seasick. Oh, I really don't like being in this nut at all." Oh, and he saw, whoop, whoop, bobbing over the ocean waves. He saw the little hazelnut with the stick sticking out of it. He knew it was his. It came over, it landed on the shore. He picked it up. He took that hazelnut. Everybody take your nut. And he took that stick out of it, and he emptied Death out down on the ground, and Death grew back to his normal size. Jack, thank you for getting me out of that nut. Oh, Death, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Can things go back to the way they were? Ah, no. Where is my scythe? Well, in all of that time, he had taken the blade and the broken handle, and he had taken it down into town, and he had the scythe fixed. Here is your scythe. Oh, thank you. Well, I'm grateful to you for saving me, so I won't visit your mother now. But don't do it again. And off he hobbled back down. And he didn't go and visit the mother that day, or for many years after that. And by the time that Death came back for Jack's mother, she had grown to a ripe old age. And when she was very old, she greeted Death as a friend, because she knew there is no life without death. Stories give us a way to wrestle with things that are very difficult for us to understand in our daily lives. In this case, Jack literally wrestles with Death. He talks to him, he traps him, and eventually he comes to understand him in his own way. Stories let us dwell in possibility. What if I could stop Death? And we see what happens. We've heard so many what-ifs in the stories in this series. What if I could change my fortune? What if I could make my circumstances better? What if I met someone who saw me as more than just a beast? What if I could help someone make a better life for themselves? What if? What if? Stories let us dwell in the magic of possibility, to give us the courage to then ask, what if, of our own daily lives. The stories we wrap around us, they clothe us like a well-tailored suit we can fit into, like your favorite pair of jeans. We make our stories fit around the contours of our lives to clothe events in meaning. Perhaps that's why so many of the classic stories feature weaving or spinning. The old tellers knew a thing or two about the importance of stories that suited us, that fitted properly into our lives, and helped ready us for the journeys that we take out into the world. This course only scratches the surface of the world of folklore and wonder tales available for you to explore. The stories in this course were selected based on the major classic tale types acknowledged by folklore scholars, with an emphasis on exposing you to a variety of different versions of these tale types from different countries. Now, for instance, the different cultural versions of Cinderella provide vastly different role models in terms of the heroine of the story and her ability to navigate in the world, the kinds of magical helpers who surround her, and the shape that her adventures take. Maybe you want to tell your own Cinderella story, where the stepmother is really nice. And Cinderella, well, she lives happily ever after with the handsome coachman instead of the prince. I hope you're inspired to seek out more adventures of your own by reading and hearing more classic oral folklore and wonder tales. I hope to see you at a storytelling festival soon.